Welcome back to an in-depth playthrough of Pathways into Darkness. This video will cover the mission briefing and the game introduction from the manual. Like a lot of other older games, it is impossible to understand the story in PID without reading the manual. The information that will be covered tells us everything that happens up to this point where you select New Game. The story is both dark and supernatural. It also has some similarities to other Bungie games. To start off, I'm going to read the mission briefing and the game introduction from the manual. After that, I will explain everything that happens in my own words and give you as many interesting tidbits as I can. The goal is at the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding of the story introduction, and even a bit more than that. If you have already read the manual countless times or would rather read it on your own, then feel free to skip ahead to where I will discuss the story. The alien projection appeared in the early spring of 1994, flickering suddenly into existence deep within the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The hologram of the Yarrow diplomat interrupted quite deliberately an important briefing of the president by his senior military staff. It told them they had 8 days to save the world. No one outside the 6 men present that day knew exactly what was said in the hours that followed. Only that a special forces team, armed to the teeth, was immediately afterwards ordered to paradrop near the site of an ancient asteroid impact in the Yucatan Peninsula. Background: 64 million years ago, a large extraterrestrial object struck the Earth in what would later be called the Yucatan Peninsula in southeastern Mexico. The dust and rock thrown up by the resulting explosion caused enormous climatic changes in the ensuing years, and many of the Earth's species became extinct during the long winter that followed. The object itself was buried thousands of feet below ground. Its nearly 2-kilometer length, remarkably intact. It remained there, motionless, for thousands of years before it finally began to stir and to dream. It was a member of a race whose history began when the Milky Way was still a formless collection of dust and gas, a powerful race of immortals which had quickly grown bored of their tiny universe and nearly exterminated themselves in war. This particular being, whose name no human throat will ever learn to pronounce, was part of the cataclysmic battle that formed Magellanic Clouds billions of years ago. It died there, or it came as close to dying as these things can. It drifted aimlessly for millions of light years before striking the Earth. The heat of impact liquefied the rock around it, which later cooled and encased the dead god's huge body far below ground. As it began to dream, it wrought unintentional changes in its environment. Locked deep beneath the earth, strange and unbelievable things faded in and out of reality. Vast caverns and landscapes bumbled to life within the rock, populated by horrible manifestations of the dead god's dream. Only during the last few centuries has the god begun to effect changes on the surface of the earth. Grotesque creatures have been sighted deep in the trackless forests of the Yucatan, and strange rumors of an ancient pyramid, which is neither Aztec nor Mayan, in the same area have been circulating in the archaeological community since the early 1930s. The god is awakening. Objective: though the god can never be killed, the projection of the Yarrow dignitary told us here on Earth that if we acted quickly, we could prevent it from awakening. To do this, however, someone was going to have to carry a low-yield nuclear device down to the god's belly and detonate it there. This would not only stun the dreaming god, but further bury it under millions of tons of rock. The Yarrow claim to have made an extensive survey of Earth's technology and maintain that this is the only way. More permanent measures will be taken by the aliens themselves, who are already on their way, when they arrive in 2.5 Earth years. The aliens have provided us with a great deal of intelligence on this strange pyramid in the Yucatan and the catacombs below it. This information has been compiled into the briefing and has been presented to you and every other member of the assault team. Good luck. Timetable: Ruth Toth, the the Yarrow representative appeared via hologram in the Pentagon at 1500 hours, 3 p.m. on Thursday, May 5, 1994. You and the rest of the assault team will be dropped from a C-151 transport over the Yucatan shortly after 0200 on Sunday, May 8th. This leaves 5 days before the Dreaming God awakes, sometime in the afternoon on the following Friday. In addition to weapons and ammunition, your squad of 8 men will carry a small low-yield nuclear device and 3 radio beacons. The bomb will be placed at the lowest point you are able to descend into the God's tunnels. Detonation can be delayed as long as 48 hours by the bomb's timer, but should under no circumstance occur after 1400 on Friday. Upon returning to the surface, triggering any one of the radio beacons will signal the extraction team to pick you up. 10 minutes are required from the time the extraction signal is given to the time the helicopter arrives at the pyramid. Allow an additional 10 minutes for the helicopter to reach minimum safe distance from the explosion of the nuclear device you have been given. Game introduction. Unfortunately, things don't go quite as planned. During the jump from the C-151, your primary parachute fails and you are able to pull the reserve only moments before crashing through the force canopy toward the ground. 2 hours later you awake, unharmed except for a few bruises, to realize that most of your equipment is missing or damaged. Fortunately, someone else jumped with the nuclear device. The muzzle of your M16 is bent just enough to render it useless, and the bag holding the spare clips for your Colt 45 is lost in the deep jungle underbrush. About the only thing which didn't break were your flashlight and survival knife. You finally reached the pyramid by foot at a little after 0600, 6 a.m. The rest of your team must have entered nearly 4 hours ago. Armed only with a knife and the knowledge contained in this briefing, you follow them. That is it for the story from the README. Now I will tell you the story again in chronological order and dig farther into each part of it. So, to start things off, we have the unnamed Dreaming God. The manual tells us that no human can pronounce the name of its race. The god is nearly 2 kilometers or 1.25 miles in length. This being is part of an immortal race. We learned that this race had grown bored in their tiny universe and nearly exterminated themselves in war. Billions of years ago, this particular being fought in a cataclysmic battle that formed the Magellanic Clouds. The being came close to dying there and has drifted through space towards Earth. The Magellanic Clouds are actually 2 different dwarf galaxies in the Milky Way, consisting of the Large Magellanic Cloud and the Small Magellanic Cloud. The Large Magellanic Cloud was discovered in 2006 and is roughly 160,000 light-years away. The Small Magellanic Cloud is also called the Nubecula Minor and is roughly 200,000 light-years away. Today, they are often reclassified as the Magellanic Spiral Galaxies. I would imagine that in 1994, astronomers probably just saw the Magellanic Clouds as one large cluster. These dwarf galaxies are named after Ferdinand Magellan, who was a famous Portuguese explorer. The manual tells us that this being drifted aimlessly for millions of years before striking the Earth at roughly 64 million years ago in the Yucatan Peninsula. Really, this object has been traveling through space for billions of years, as the manual tells us that the cataclysmic battle occurred billions of years ago. The result of this being striking the Earth was explosions and enormous climate changes that resulted in species becoming extinct because of the long winters that followed. Basically, the manual is saying that this collision caused an ice age. When the being hit the Earth like an asteroid, it got buried beneath the Earth's surface. The manual says that the heart of the impact liquefied the Earth and thus the being became buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. How deep down was the being buried? Well, in-game, the deepest we go within the pyramid is 3,276.8 meters. This is roughly equivalent to 2.04 miles. So we get a roughly 1.25 mile long being that is buried about 2 miles beneath the Earth's surface. Thousands of years after the impact, the being began to stir and dream, bringing about changes to the environment. We are talking caverns and landscapes with horrible manifestations. All of these changes at this point are beneath the Earth's surface. To put this time scale into perspective, a few thousand years later of when the being began to dream is still roughly 64 million years ago. In the last few centuries, the dreaming being has brought about changes to the surface of the Earth. Strange creatures began to be spotted within the Yucatan Peninsula. In the 1930s, a pyramid which is neither Aztec nor Mayan began to circulate the archaeological community. The pyramid on the box cover does look Mayan, but apparently it is not. The application image on the mag in 1993 showed an Egyptian symbol behind an Egyptian-looking pyramid. This symbol looks like the Egyptian Ankh symbol, which is the symbol for life. There are also some Egyptian-like symbols that we will find within the pyramids as we play through the game. Are all of the pyramids on Earth actually connected somehow? Nikola Tesla was one of the greatest inventors of all time, and he had a fascination with the pyramids. It seems that he may have thought that the Giza Pyramid of Egypt was in fact a wireless power plant, and that coordinates and other various pyramid coordinates throughout the world had some sort of significance. Today, this is largely rejected, but given the complement of Tesla, it would not be surprising if there were elements of truth in his theory. I am not even 100% sure though that I am explaining his theory correctly either. There were a lot of other things about the pyramid that I could go on about, but I just wanted to give you a taste of some of the theories out there. It is considered a wonder of the world for a very good reason, and the reason extends well beyond just the confusion about how the pyramid was built. Part of the manual that discusses the game's interface contains a section about miscellaneous debris that reads as follows. You will undoubtedly come across debris in the corridors, such as bones, standing water, moss, slime, molds, etc. You must realize that this pyramid has been lying around for millions of years, and there is no maid service. You can't pick up the debris. Wait a minute. Didn't the pyramid appear in the 1930s? Well, apparently this pyramid has been forming underground since the being began to dream. It probably just started forming about 64 million years ago and has been building itself up to the Earth's surface. A press release for the game indicates that the size of the pyramid is roughly 4 million square feet. This pyramid is humongous. The idea of a god dreaming and creating things actually carries over to other Bungie games. In Bungie's Myth series, the world of Myth was formed by the dreams of the gods, Word and Nyx. In fact, there is dream magic within the game that you can use against your enemy. I'm guessing there are some ties here to Bungie's Marathon series also, but I haven't delved into that series yet. The manual talks about a Nazi investigation of the pyramid in the late 1930s, a little bit farther down in the same section about the game's interface. Let's read it. Previously living sentient beings, PLSBs. You will meet many people that have entered the pyramid before you. Unfortunately, most of them are dead. You can search the bodies by clicking the search button while standing on top of them. The CIA has provided intelligence of a German expedition in the late 1930s. Apparently, the Nazis were looking for a secret weapon, but none of them ever returned from the pyramid. If only there was a way to talk to them. We will actually learn in the game that this expedition occurred in 1938. World War II was from 1939 to 1945. They were looking for a secret weapon, huh? Sounds more and more like Indiana Jones, doesn't it? In the World War II timeframe, the Nazis would search for all kinds of artifacts because they wanted to provide evidence of their superior race. Much like in Indiana Jones where they were searching for the Ark of the Covenant, among other things. We will see as we explore the pyramid exactly what the secret weapon is that they are looking for. This section from the manual that I just read called these dead soldiers previously living sentient beings, and hints if only there was a way to talk to them. Sentient means to have sense, perception, or conscience. How could these dead soldiers still have sense and perception? The dreaming being must be having some sort of effect on them. How strange. On Thursday, May 5th, 1994, the Yarrow diplomat by the name of Ru Toth appeared by hologram at the Pentagon. This Yarrow knows a great deal about the being beneath the pyramid and informs the United States government that they had 8 days to save the world. Note that the press release for the game had this at 6 days instead of 8, meaning that they changed it shortly before release. The dreaming being is awakening, and apparently that is not a good thing. Perhaps this immortal being is still thirsty for war and will destroy the Earth, or something to that effect. Ru Toth informs the US that the Yarrow will arrive in 2.5 years in order to take permanent measures against the Dreaming God. In the meantime, we need to take a low-yield nuclear device down to the Dreaming God being and explode it. This will keep the Dreaming God asleep by stunning it and burying it under more rock. This is just a temporary solution until the Yarrow arrive and can deal with the being. Apparently, the Yarrow were somehow able to analyze the Earth's surface from who knows where out in space and came to the conclusion that this was what had to be done. This makes me wonder whether there are other beings of the same race as this one that exist within space from the cataclysmic battle that occurred billions of years ago. Perhaps the Yarrow are going around space analyzing planets looking for them. It seems that the Yarrow race and the Immortal Beings race appear within the Marathon franchise also, but you will have to wait until I get to that series before we can learn more about them. Just a few days later, on Sunday, May 8, 1994, at 0200, a Special Forces team was transported over the Yucatan. These Special Force agents are armed to the teeth and equipped with knowledge from the Yarrow. They also possess a 5-kiloton, low-yield nuclear device and 3 radio beacons. They swore an oath of secrecy about their mission. The penalty for divulging this information is death. Their mission, as we discussed, is to carry the nuclear device to the base of the pyramid where the dreaming being is located and set it to detonate. They will set the timer on the nuke just long enough for themselves to escape. A sub-directive of their mission is to collect any artifacts of treasure they come across. These items will be studied by top archaeologists and may provide answers to the origins of the universe. The Special Forces team is dropped by parachute over the pyramid in the Yucatan by the C-151 transport. This team consists of 8 soldiers, including the main character. The player is part of this Special Forces team. In the official hint book, the character is referred to as Sergeant Eddings. Giving the character a name is probably a mistake that Jason Jones regrets, but oh well, it is what it is. Anyways, Sergeant Eddings' parachute fails, but he is able to pull his reserve, moments before crashing through the forest canopy onto the ground, rendering him unconscious. Eddings wakes up a couple of hours later to find most of his equipment missing or damaged. The muzzle of his M16 is bent, and the bag holding the spare clip of his Colt 45 are lost in the jungle underbrush. What he has left that still works is a flashlight, survival knife, and pen and paper that he would use to draw a map of the pyramid as he goes. The game starts at exactly 0613 when he enters the pyramid. The rest of the team entered the pyramid nearly 4 hours ago, meaning that they entered the pyramid shortly after the 0200 drop. The manual tells us that the nuclear device must be set to go off before Friday, May 13th at 0200. In-game, this time is actually 0613, which gives us exactly 4 days or 96 hours to set the bomb. Don't worry though, this is more than enough time. The code for arming of the nuke is 2870334, unless someone changed the code, that is. Box art image for the game shows Eddings approaching the pyramid. We know that this is Eddings because our comrades entered the pyramid shortly after 0200 in the morning. Since there is daylight in the image, the soldier has to be Eddings, who entered at 0613. Eddings in the image has part of his uniform torn. More than likely, this was caused by him falling through the brush on his crash landing. The image of the pyramid seems to resemble more of a Mayan pyramid rather than the Egyptian-like pyramid that is represented on the original application icon. This pyramid looks like you enter at the top of the pyramid, which is not the case in the actual game. In the game, you start at ground floor, which is at an elevation of 0 meters. The pyramid on the endgame screen looks more like the pyramid on the box art image. The original 1993 box shows a strange creature hiding in the brush at the bottom right corner of the image. This creature was removed in later versions of the box cover. Perhaps that is because this creature doesn't actually appear within the game, and therefore doesn't fit very well. The manual told us that the M16 had a muzzle that was bent just enough to render it useless. The M16 in the image has a muzzle that looks straight. Perhaps there is some damage to the muzzle that we can't see in the image. Eddings in his picture does have his Colt 45, but as the manual suggests, he lost all his spare clips. The magazine that is currently in his Colt 45 is actually empty. When we start the game, we will have an empty magazine for the Colt. In the image, Eddings has his survival knife and watch that we start the game with. We will need that watch so we know how much time we have to set the bomb off and escape the pyramid. Unfortunately, we don't have the bomb, and we will have to find our comrades who are already inside the pyramid in order to get the bomb. We also start the game with a flashlight and a small canvas bag, which are not shown in the image. The few problems with this image are consistent with some of the other game screenshots that were released by Bungie. See the link in the description for a bunch of issues with official screenshots of the game from Bungie. Well, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the video and that even some PID veterans learned a thing or two. In the next video, we will be inside the pyramid on ground floor. I hope to see you then.